What's up, everybody? For this video, I want to go over all the different cars I've owned over the years since I got my license. I have owned a number of different cars. Some of those you have seen on the channel, most of them you have, but there's a few of them that you guys probably don't know I ever owned that never turned up on the channel, but some of them were pretty interesting and pretty cool. Others, blah. But let's just start with the beginning. My first car that I actually bought myself was the 1996 Dodge Dakota. I'll include a picture of that right here. I bought that thing when I was still a junior in high school. I believe it was either when I was still in high school my junior year or the summer after, one of the two. I was working part-time at a grocery store, still going to school, had to take a loan out with my bank to buy it, but I really wanted the truck really bad. I wanted the truck really bad just to have something to drive, and it was a great vehicle for me. I actually bought it from a guy who at the time lived right across the street from me. The thing turned up for sale. It had been for sale for a while and nobody had bought it. And I went over one day, asked him what he wanted for it, drove it. There's nothing mechanically wrong with it. Fell in love with it and bought it. And it's pretty much all history from there. You guys know all that went into that truck and all the work I did to it. Of course, sadly, I ended up totaling it. I got to do pretty much everything I had wanted to do to it. I got to kind of accomplish my initial dream, I suppose you could say, to it, which was turbocharging it. Never got to completely finish the build, but at least I got to do it and got to enjoy it. That kind of sparked an interest in me in those trucks right then and there because I enjoyed that thing so much and learned so much about it. That was my first car, and then I owned that thing for probably 2.5 years. That was the only vehicle that I owned, was the Dakota, until I got out of high school and got my first actual official full-time job working at a factory. I was making a good bit of money, and I wanted to buy something that I could daily drive in the wintertime, keep the truck from being driven through all the road salt. Wanted something four-wheel drive, but I didn't want like a pickup truck. I didn't want a four-wheel drive pickup truck. I don't like lifted pickup trucks. Don't really have an interest in four-wheel drive pickup trucks. Don't have an interest in like diesels or anything like that. Duramaxes, Cummins, Power Strokes. No interest at all. Don't like them. So I decided to go and buy a Jeep. I bought my friend's 1994 Jeep Cherokee. I'll include a picture of it right here. Four-wheel drive, sport, 4-liter inline six. The old AMC engine was an automatic, and it had really high mileage, but the thing ran and drove really good. And it only gave me a few issues here and there. I had a transmission line blowout on it. One of the cooler lines exploded. It would develop random oil leaks just all over the place that I had to fix here and there. And those were really all the only other things I had to do. I ended up having to put a new battery in it after I got it because the thing sat for 2 years before I got it. And I had to put a new driver's side door on it because the window mechanism was all ripped apart. So I just bought a junkyard door for $50 and threw it on there. And that was the only repair work I had to do. And of course I had to lift it. It had a 4-inch lift and it was on 35s. It was all ghetto cheap stuff, but it worked and it looked pretty awesome despite being so, I don't know what you would call it, but it was pretty torn up, had no fenders on it or anything like that, but I didn't really care. It was four-wheel drive, it was lifted, it was tall, it was noisy, straight piped after I owned it, of course. And I did a couple other little things to it here and there. I did a full tune-up on it after I got it, changed fluids and stuff. And I put like aftermarket headlights on it and a couple other little things. Not real cringy headlights, they were just the HID, like sealed beam projectors you can get. So no like chrome stuff. I hate chrome lights. But had some little things here and there, had a system in it, and it was a fun Jeep. I enjoyed it a little bit, but I realized after getting it that I'm not that big into, lifted things, off-road stuff. It was fun, and I enjoyed it, and I don't regret owning it, and I may own another one again. I've kind of been itching to buy another one for a while, but I just haven't decided to pull the trigger on one because I don't really have the time for another project, or the space for another vehicle. But I decided to sell it after winter passed. It was around March, put it up for sale. Everybody had their tax return money burned a hole in my pocket, so I threw the thing up for sale for $1,000. And literally 2 hours after I posted on Craigslist, I had a guy here with cash buying it from me. So it wasn't even on Craigslist for half a day, and somebody came, bought it for me. I signed the title over to him, and off it went. And then next car I owned, I spent some of the money I made selling the Jeep on it, and And of course, I'd been saving money for a while looking for a new project. Now, at the time, what I really, really wanted was a 240SX. I really wanted an S13 hatch so bad, but I just couldn't find one that was running, driving, not hacked up, not chopped up, not ruined by somebody prior, or one that wasn't super, super expensive, like $4,000 or $5,000 for one. Because around here, you think drift tax is bad. Other places around here, the only ones that are cheap are totally rotted out. 240s don't do well as far as rust goes. They like to rust, and pretty much every cheap 240 left around here is pretty rusted out, or it's going to be $3,000 plus. So I couldn't find one, and then I started looking up other things, started looking up like Mustangs and Camaros and stuff, and that was pretty much how I ended up finding my 1988 Ford Mustang Fox Body. Here's a picture of that. It had the 5.0 liter V8. It was originally a 4-cylinder car and was swapped at one point. It had the 8.8 inch limited slip rear end in it, 5-speed manual transmission, Edelbrock carburetor swap. The swap was not done properly, but it worked. Ran and drove. I had a few issues with like starters and like the bolts just falling off of it shortly after I got it because things were not torqued to spec. And the whole car had. I found out later on that the car did have solid engine mounts and things on it, and it just liked to shake itself apart. I had a starter literally fall off on me once, and the block plate was bad, so the starter would always pop out of engagement, and I had a bunch of other issues with it, transmission related issues especially. Had to put a new flywheel and clutch in it, had to rebuild the transmission, do a few other things, but I enjoyed it, and I owned that car for 5 or 6 months. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but after buying the car, shortly after, I left the job I was working at and didn't have the money to really invest in it. And then, of course, the engine eventually spun a rod bearing while I was on the highway. And then I decided I was done with that thing and decided to sell it. And, of course, Nate ended up buying it from me. And later on, we ended up putting a new engine in it for him and everything. And it ran and drove until he decided to get a cleaner shell because that shell was rusty. And that car is long gone now. I ended up buying it back the early, like, very end of 2016. I bought it back. We split the cost on another car. I ended up with the gray car back and then some 2.3 turbo parts that came with the car we split on with Nate, but I ended up deciding the car was too rusty and let it go, and we ended up just stripping it, pulling everything off of it we could, and then sending it off to the scrapyard, and it is no longer. And of course, I sold that and was done with it. And then the next car I ended up getting would have been the GTI. I bought the GTI literally 2 days after I totaled the Dakota, actually. I went and test drove it about a week prior to buying it, and then I totaled the truck and was like, well, at least I got the money and already set something up to go buy. So I bought the Volkswagen, bought that for $700. Price-wise, I paid $3,200 for the green Dakota, paid $500 for my Jeep, I paid $2,200 for the Mustang, which was, I don't know, I mean, it had a lot of nice parts in it. It had the engine not blown up, but like the 8.8 rear end aftermarket control arms, things like that. So I guess it wasn't that bad, but I could have found a better deal maybe. And I paid $700 for the GTI, 5-speed manual, VR6. Here's a picture of that right here. That car, as much as I enjoyed it, it sounded awesome. It was 5-speed, pretty fast little car, kind of neat little hatchback German thing. I'll probably not own another German vehicle for a very long time because the thing had high miles, like really high. It had over 240,000 miles on it, so I wasn't, like I expected it to be perfect. But every time something broke, parts were stupid expensive for it, and I needed special tools to work on it all the time, and things were just weird on it, bizarre. Everything is shoehorned in that engine bay so tight that it made it difficult to work on, and I was pretty much fixing that thing every weekend, and it also drained my wallet pretty dry as well. As much as I enjoyed it, I decided after having it for about 6 or 7 months that I wanted nothing to do with it, so I sold it, and then that's pretty much the end of that. I made a few videos on that. You guys can go back and look at them. It was the intro video for the channel for a while. It was me doing a burnout in it. And as much as I enjoyed it, it was time to let it go. And let's see, this would have been, it was after I got my tax return back, so it was March of 2017 last year. I bought the 2009 Hyundai Elantra. Was going to make it a daily driver. The car needed nothing but had like a tire that leaked and needed an O2 sensor. Fixed that, did an oil change and a couple other little quick tune-up things to it. And the thing ran and drove great. It was low miles. It was a new car. There was nothing wrong with it. And I was going to daily drive that and then make the Volkswagen my project car. And then I realized I didn't want anything to do with the Volkswagen. I just wanted to drive it until either I sold it or till the wheels fell off of it, basically. So I came up across a deal I couldn't really pass up, and I traded the Hyundai for a 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass. Here is a picture of that. The 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass, 350 swapped. It wasn't the 307, I think was what came in that originally. 350, it was an automatic TH350 trans, and that was about it. It had aftermarket wheels on it. It had the stupid Q-Jet carburetor on it, but it was a beautiful car, really clean. Had the earlier year model front end swapped onto it. Looked great, and it was in great shape body-wise, but the engine had severe head gasket problems. It leaked out of every crack and crevice you could imagine. It had no power at all. It was just a mess, and I realized shortly after getting it that I wasn't all that interested in building the car. The American Muscle style cars are pretty cool, but it just wasn't my thing. I decided I didn't want to build, a big V8 car. The Cutlass was by far the heaviest vehicle I've ever owned. Those things are ungodly heavy, and I just didn't want to build something that, to make it even remotely fast, I would have to squeeze so much power out of that engine. I mean, it would make a lot of torque, but in a straight line, the thing wouldn't be very quick, and it's not going to go around corners very well either. And I didn't want something that was that clean either. I wanted something that I could modify and mess around with and not feel guilty about it. So I got the Cutlass and then parked it at my grandparents' house and never touched it. I never did a single thing to it at all. Didn't fix anything, didn't mess with anything, didn't touch anything. I got it, took it to my grandparents' house, parked it, and then when I got rid of it, it was trailered on out. And I got rid of it like a month or two after owning it. It wasn't long. And then after the Cutlass, I took the Cutlass and traded it for the 1995 Mitsubishi Eclipse, which is kind of the primary project for the channel, although it's sort of in hiatus at the moment. It's 1995 Mitsubishi Eclipse, 420A engine, 5-speed manual. The thing was riddled with issues when I originally got it. Barely ran, barely drove, barely stopped. Tires were all shot. The thing was just a mess. Interior was disgusting, but I loved it. I don't know what it was about the car that drew me to it, and I traded a car that was in far better shape and far more valuable for it, but it just fit what I wanted to do so well because it's 5-speed manual, little Japanese hatchback, first Japanese car I've ever owned, although it's more American than it is Japanese. And I was just excited about it, and I ended up fixing a whole bunch of stuff on it. What I really liked about this car, and it's the first vehicle I've ever owned that I could do this with, anytime it needed parts, I could go to the junkyard and pull parts off of a number of different cars, and it was all cheap stuff. Parts for that car are so cheap, it's ridiculous. I can pull parts off of other Eclipses, which are pretty plentiful, Talons. I can pull them off of Dodge Avengers, there's plenty of those around here, Chrysler Sebrings. I can pull parts out of Neons, out of PT Cruisers. Some minivans even have parts that fit on it. Like, there's just a ton of cars that I can use parts off of, and the thing's covered in junkyard parts left and right off of random vehicles. It had an ECU from a Neon in it. It's got brake calipers from a Sebring, control arms from a Dodge Avenger, like just a bunch of random stuff. And I think that was part of the reason why I liked it, because I could just make a trip to the junkyard, buy stuff, spend $100, and get all these parts and fix the car. And I've really enjoyed it. Of course, I still own the car to this day. It is the primary project on the channel. And, of course, you guys already know that I fixed all the brakes, I fixed all of the other issues it kind of had, and then went ahead and mega scored it, so now the car ran and drove great. And all the car needs now is suspension work, and then it needs some head work and a full timing overhaul, and the thing is going to be dialed. The car is relatively rust free. The car was undercoated by a third party at some point in its life, so the only rust on it is in the strut towers because they couldn't get that part of the car sprayed, so it's got giant rust holes in the strut towers, but the rest of the car is clean as a whistle. And then the most recent vehicle I have acquired is my 1992 Dodge Dakota. Here's a picture of that. So that is the most recent vehicle I have bought. I bought it right after I sold the GTI, spent the money I made off of the GTI on that truck, and let it sit for a couple of months while I just drove the Mitsubishi around and put time into fixing that thing up. And then as winter started approaching, parked the Eclipse, because the Eclipse ended up breaking too, water pump went out. Parked the Eclipse, got the truck back, it needed a brake line done, I had a shop do that. Went, fixed a couple other things. The other big thing I needed was a water pump. Put that in, bled the brakes to the best of my ability because I can't bleed the rears. And it's been a very reliable vehicle up until this point. I've had it for quite a while now. I bought it in September and started driving it in, I don't know, November for a couple months. The thing sat for 4 years. Put a brake line and a water pump in it, and the thing runs and drives flawlessly. It runs and drives so good. I take it on the highway. I drive it an hour or two away and back for junkyard runs and stuff, and the thing has never given me a single issue thus far. And of course, pretty soon it's going to be a turbo project once again. I'm going to be turbocharging it like I did the Green Dakota. Of course, I'm going to be doing things a lot better and a lot differently. And that pretty much brings us to the present. Those are all of the vehicles that I have owned. So let's see how many cars I've actually owned at this point. It's actually not that many, I suppose, but I had the 1996 Dodge Dakota, 1994 Jeep Cherokee, 1988 Ford Mustang, 1997 Volkswagen GTI, 2009 Hyundai Elantra, 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass, 1995 Mitsubishi Eclipse, and the 1992 Dodge Dakota. So that's 8 cars. That's actually not that bad, I suppose, since I've had my license for 4 years. It's 2 cars a year. I don't know, that's not terrible, I guess. I've owned this one for almost 3 years, and then I haven't owned a single other car for an entire year yet, although I'm getting very close with the Mitsubishi. That's pretty much it. That's all the cars I've owned. That's how many cars I've owned. That's a little bit of background on all of them as well. Pictures of each of them so you guys have at least all seen them. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. This video probably ended up being way longer than I wanted. I didn't prepare for this video at all. I just kind of winged it, so hopefully it didn't come out too hard to follow or anything. I want to thank you guys very much for watching. Please hit that like button and subscribe, and I will see you guys later.